Hello, fellow historians. Welcome to the How to Historical Context podcast. I am Dr. Johnson, a fellow history buff and director of the National Archives Museum in Washington, D.C. With a passion for remembering and analyzing war times, this podcast is a way for me to get your specific questions answered. Remember, the comments are always open. Today, we will take a deep dive into the Vietnam War and try to answer at Roman 24's question: why did propaganda not work in the Vietnam War? In short, the Vietnam War was a conflict from 1955 to 1975 that was a part of the more renowned Cold War. Taking place in Vietnam, it was a conflict between the Northern Viet Cong communists and the U.S. backed South Saigons. This war ended in victory for the Communists and the unification of these separated parties. However, for the United States, there were many attitudes of dissatisfaction with their involvement in this war, which we will look more into today. My hypothesis before researching this topic was that technology and attitude toward war as a whole greatly impacted and increased adverse reactions to the propaganda of the Vietnam War. Let's see if that's correct. To start my research, I used the book U.S. Official Propaganda During the Vietnam War by Caroline Page, which is linked in the description below, to look at the theory and strategy of the U.S. propaganda policy. According to the author, the initial aim, as with any such campaign, was to control public opinion and to create a climate enabling the administration to prosecute the war to its desired pattern. However, as the war dragged on, the aim became increasingly that of placating public opinion. So this initial aim was simple: control the narrative of the masses. President Johnson's agenda was held tightly to his chest, but he acknowledged the power of public opinion. This power became prevalent as time passed, and truth became a question instead of a fact. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. What was the campaign's goal for the people's opinion? The book noted, to convince its audience of the necessity for and importance of this war and the increasing U.S. commitment to it. U.S. citizens have a deep rooted sense of patriotism and are well known antagonists of communism, two facts specifically used to garner support. The term rally to the flag was predominant in this propaganda campaign, as many soldiers and supplies were allied with South Vietnam. However, citizens' initial response was comments or criticisms about technicalities and confusion with administrative decisions. Think about that confusion, and after this brief message from our sponsors, we'll dive into why this greatly impacted public opinion on the war.
Want a break from the ads? If you tap now to watch a short video, you'll receive 30 minutes of ad-free music.
All right, so what might have kept public opinion from supporting this war? Inconsistent messaging. The rise of modern pictures and television greatly affected how people could firsthand witness the atrocities of war. I looked at an article on the 548 Life magazine covers published during the Vietnam War, aptly titled Front Cover Imagery and the Social Construction of the Vietnam War, a case study of Life magazine's iconology and its impact on visual discourse. Again, the link to the article is in the description below. It was noted in the article that the researchers found competing frames overlapping at all times, shifting attention to one narrative or the other for a while before turning back to disregarded ones after a certain time span. This inconsistency led the public opinion to unravel with no clear message and conflicting photos. Comparing the US's propaganda idea with the visuals provided by Life magazine shows the media's reality of war. The government maintained that its aim was peace first. On a side note, the government's propaganda efforts said peace was their primary goal, despite any actions pointing to a different conclusion. Comparatively, Life magazine's first cover page was Vietnam, our next showdown. Later on, the government used propaganda to justify sympathy for the South Vietnamese people. Life magazine used pictures of soldiers to show the U.S. Army under fire, garnering sympathy and support, but also raising new questions about the vulnerability of the U.S. soldiers. Even later, Life magazine used pictures of battle scarred northern Vietnamese soldiers and U.S. soldiers to frame the Vietnam War in a way that made the viewers ask, what is the purpose of this war, fully understanding the weight of human life? Seeing these actions is when citizens first started to understand how barbaric the war had become, ultimately culminating in the anti war movement. The U.S. used freedom and solidarity in its propaganda campaign to gain support for this war. But because of the vague and minimalist approach to public messaging, the idea of truth became distorted as truth and fiction were no longer distinguishable. Having to use media photos released by Army journalists to understand what was going on also diminished trust in the government's decisions at this time. Propaganda is a tool that needs to understand the context of the audience to be persuasive accurately. What do you have to say about it in the context of Vietnam? I'll be right back with my thoughts after the break.
Grubhub Perks give you deals on the food you love. The kind of deals that make your boogie.
Propaganda is a technique that requires a lot of things to work. Most notably in this context, a clear, united message. In this case, propaganda confused the U.S. citizens and even caused them to grow disdain regarding this war because of the inconsistent messaging of peace first and the action that said war is needed. Propaganda could not help garner support or identify a common enemy to unite the American people. So, comparing this research with my hypothesis, the technology with media photographs and television greatly affected people's attitudes towards the war. As narratives became convoluted, this confusion led American citizens to separate themselves from the emotional propaganda that the government administration used. Propaganda did not affect the citizens' support of war, but worsened its reactions. Now that we know the technology and attitude of war at this time, next week we will look at the preceding Gulf War. Did the improvement of technology lead to a new form of liberation? What was America's attitude towards international wars at this time? If you have any questions, comment below, and I will see you in the next episode. Farewell, worthy traveler. Good night.